there are two different kinds of sacrifices in Leviticus. There are free will sacrifices, and there are not free will sacrifices. So I want to begin with looking at the free will sacrifices. The idea being here, okay, so you want to bring God a present, like a housewarming gift. Here's how you do it. Now, within these free will offerings, you just kind of want to bring him something. There are two subcategories. There are whole offerings, right? Whole burnt offerings, sometimes called Holocaust offerings, where the entire animal is burned on the altar. And there are things that are called well-being offerings, sometimes called peace offerings. And in these, part of the animal is burned, part of the animal is given to and eaten by the priests who perform the ritual, and part of it is returned to the person who offered the sacrifice for them to eat. All of these, both the burnt offerings and the well-being offerings, are really expressions of love for the deity and thanks and hope, whatever else. The main point is that they are, for the most part, not required, right? This is why free will. So you can bring these anytime you want to, and then the text simply tells you how to do so when you do feel like doing that. I want to stop here a second to note that these types of sacrifices, the whole burnt offering, the grain offering, which is a subset of the whole burnt offering, and the well-being offering, these sacrifices are known everywhere in the Bible. There's reference all the time to people offering whole burnt offerings or offering these well-being offerings. These are ubiquitous throughout the Bible. It doesn't matter who the author is, doesn't matter what the text is, doesn't matter when it's from. Everybody knows about these. But the sacrifices that follow, the ones I'm about to get to, that is the not free will ones, those sacrifices are known only to Leviticus and the texts directly related to it. So that's, I want to just pause to keep as a reminder that what we have here in Leviticus isn't reflective of actual practice in ancient Israel. At least certainly not at the time that it was written. What we have here is a utopian text written by priests, right? And one that expresses the specific values of this like priestly social subset, right? Which isn't to say it's not important, right? It's in our Bible, it's a biblical text. It has as much weight as any other. But historically, the ritual system we see here in Leviticus was not universally ancient Israelite. Most ancient Israelites would have no idea about basically any of this. With that caveat in mind, I want to turn to the required sacrifices. Okay, so you screwed up somehow. The first category of these are usually called sin offerings. You've inadvertently transgressed some prohibition. And inadvertently is important, right? You didn't know something wasn't allowed, and then you found out it wasn't allowed. Oh man, what a silly mistake I made. The example I use all the time is like, you didn't know that you couldn't, go trim your flowers on the Sabbath, right? And then someone was like, you can't do that. And you're like, oh man, I had no idea. Or you did know you couldn't trim your flowers on the Sabbath, but you forgot which day it was, right? Same thing, right? Oops, you knew better, but you didn't realize it. You just made a mistake. Unwitting errors, inadvertent transgressions. So you've got that category. And then you've got what are, in the second one here, a trespass. What this means is you've intentionally or unintentionally trespassed against the sacred sphere, right? You've done something inappropriate within the sanctuary. Like you went and you grabbed something that you're not supposed to touch. Or maybe you falsely swore using God's name, right? Which is also a sacred item in the mind of the Bible. Anyway, for these, you also need to bring what's called a reparation offering as a type of sacrifice, and then with a little payment added on top. For the most part, we're talking here about unintentional sins, right? Stuff that you didn't mean to do, or at the very least, you did, and then you felt bad about afterward. So we have the categories: free will offerings and required offerings for unintentional sins. After this, we get this whole list of the detailed ritual procedures for all the various sacrifices, for burnt offerings and grain offerings and sin offerings and guilt offerings and well-being offerings, right? Each of which has its own rituals and its own practices. The key for all of the required sacrifices is that all of these violations require, and all of the sacrifices that we have laid out for us provide this thing that is usually translated as expiation or atonement. And this is a word, obviously, that we see in here all the time, right? The sacrifice that atones for the sin. So the real question that we have to get to here first, like one of the big novelties of the critical academic study of this material, is the definition of the word atonement. Because atonement in Leviticus, in these chapters, is not what we mean by atonement today.